Something that's definitely true about this universe that is pretty easy to notice is a remarkable stability that seems to span universally, especially where you find human beings. Um, and stability is obviously the facilitating force that allows anything resembling progress to happen. And usually with stability, there's a center force that is more or less the result of two or more forces acting upon each other. Like our nearest star, the sun, it's insanely unique. It's at first glance not much special or anything special, but it is, especially for its type. It's the combination of an intense fusion, an intense outward force through fusion, 27 million degrees at its hottest. And at the same time, there's an intense inward force, it's gravity. And these two work perfectly to form exactly what the sun is, which is a remarkably stable entity. That's really the main feature of our star, is stability. And I believe it has temperature fluctuation within 0.07%. You can check me on that, but less than 1% temperature fluctuation. Yes, it has sunspots. Yes, there are solar winds. Yes, there are solar events, but they are not so catastrophic so as to obliterate this system. And this intense heat reaches out from this violently intense zone, and it goes and goes and goes, and by the time it touches my skin, it is this perfect warmth that actually gives life. And you add to that earth, um, just so happens as it is, with its distance from the sun exactly as it is, the tilt exactly as it is, the magnetic field of Earth exactly as it is, the atmosphere exactly as it is, the exact sort of sunlight, the exact sort of energy that radiates off that star, just exactly as it is. And I mean with changes in any direction, slightly, would have absolutely catastrophic results. Nothing would be as is without everything being exactly as it is. And the stability that comes out of this is astounding. And you extend into that further. The human being as a symptom of this stability operates similarly. And the seasons, the 4 seasons, not too dissimilar from human temperament. Two extremes, summer and winter, with two transition seasons. And we describe most human affairs, our emotions, within these two extremes. Love, hate, push, pull, right or wrong. Basically anything that we can describe about human relationships exists within these two extremes, or some sort of transition, or some sort of maybe type sentiment. And it's pretty clear, living here on Earth, that our entire being, what we are, is a symptom of this system of balances. And these seasons are because of Earth's tilt. The difference between the exact bottom and the exact top isn't much. I think it's 30 something degrees. So it's not much of a tilt, but it is enough to change the seasons like that. In terms of mileage, it's only a couple thousand miles. Tens of thousands, but nothing on a universal scale. Imagine if Earth was, closer or further, when something as simple as the tilt makes something as extreme as summer and winter two completely opposing and obvious seasons. And if the sun was any bigger or smaller, and you throw the moon into the mix, how unlikely it is that we have such a massive moon in comparison to Earth's size. Highly, 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 highly unlikely. And then you add to that the fact that the moon is in just the right spot to where it doesn't spin. And therefore, there is no additional effect on Earth because of the absence of that spin. The moon is effectively grabbed, locked, and held still. And its effects on Earth are subtle yet massive. It's so much so that we don't even notice on a day-to-day basis. So much so that we have something called a day-to-day basis. That we just go to sleep at night and we wake up in the morning. And how strange it is, too, that we have this sleeping and waking cycle that just so happens to correspond with the way Earth, the moon, and the sun behave together. I mean, imagine if we were in some situation where there was drastically more sunlight all the time. Or drastically more night all the time. It just so happens to be a third of the day to sleep. And we just flag out. We shut down effectively. And how helpful is that for survival? To be so vulnerable like that. To just... imagine thousands of years ago. You're in the woods or you're wherever you are. And you just have to turn off and lay there. And completely unplugged from your surroundings. You're just vulnerable to any and everything. How is that actually helpful? Outside of sustaining the psychology of the human being. It's not helpful in a raw survival context, but in terms of an extended, over time, contributor to human psychological stability, then it fits. So, sleep, even as a thing, seems to always be something that fit within a larger scheme, almost as if stability was implied all the way. It was always there. It's not like there was ever a time where we didn't sleep. And this goes even further than what I'm saying right now. The system of balances here locally is so perfect that it's like a million dials from 0 to 100, all of them having a 0 to 100 on each dial. And each one is set in just the right spot, and if you moved any one of them, it wouldn't work. Everything would be different, and it would not be possible to be here right now. It is absolutely perfect. And the more you investigate the sun, the more you're just, it's breathtaking how stable that thing is. And therefore Earth as well. And us. And the stabilizing force, obviously, for the sun is that tandem of outward pressure from fusion and inward pressure from gravity. And with humans, you take something so simple as like a sport, football, basketball. The stabilizing force at its core is the love for the game. But then it extends into other layers, builds into a league. It's trustworthy. And then rules can slowly be built. Regulations, salary caps, ways to gauge skill, ways to set up the most competitive possible situation. But within the league, within each game, there is the freedom to animate incredible, intense, short periods of instability. That's what the game is. And that's kind of what a day-to-day situation is what a relationship is. It always kind of goes back to a force not too dissimilar from gravity. Gravity itself. Because the things that keep certain celestial bodies together is the gravitational force that is something that is an extension of the particular makeup of each celestial body. And it's insane how much humans are like that too. And it starts with the eyes, the sense of vision. We notice particular characteristics. And maybe those eyes see you as well, and they notice a particular set of characteristics. And it's hard to be exactly conscious of what's happening here. It's like I say, it's a feeling at first, and then it's slowly put into words. But this attraction appears, and this isn't always romantic, obviously. We have all kinds of different ways of being appealing to each other. Central to that being what we're looking for at that particular moment. I mean, if you're going to church, you're looking for something specific in the people in the area. If you're looking for a job, you're looking for something specific no matter where you are, really. And that's kind of what opportunities end up being. It's kind of this weird contrast between the randomness of the world and something we're looking for at that moment. And stability in terms of relationships. I mean, obviously, it's going to start with stability of each particular human being. And some people are pretty unstable. I mean, that's kind of what we say. And some people are incredibly stable, but maybe a little boring. So, even within each human being, there is this interesting element of stable instability. I don't know if that's even the right word, because instability sounds almost derogatory, but almost this stable spontaneity, let's say. And in a relationship, you always need to be able to go back to the central force, because shit's gonna get weird sometimes. Shit's gonna get not perfect. Shit's gonna get a little dicey there from time to time. So you have to be able to remember why you're there. You have to be able to say to yourself, like, I'm madly in love with this person. You actually have to remind yourself of that sometimes. Because at the end of the day, you are two different people. Two different little universes who are half the same and half completely different. And it's that stabilizing force that allows all of the frayed edges of humanity to continue to, let's say, grow or progress. I mean, if you meet somebody and within a very short period of time you realize that you don't have this stabilizing force, then you will more than likely go in separate directions, and you won't really think twice about that. And that'll be fine. But if this stabilizing force does present itself, and it's evident between both of you, let's say even, 70-30, then you leave a residue on each other, even if it's brief. There's just something that happens with people. And it allows the possibility for multiple iterations. it allows the possibility for some kind of further contact. And this is what dating is. And in terms of men and women in general, I wouldn't say that men are stable and women are unstable. Obviously, men and women, both as human beings, there is stable and unstable among both of us. And I don't even really like the term unstable, because again, it kind of has like a negative association. But I've always sort of thought of men and women as sort of more solid and more fluid, if that makes sense. And I've noticed when men and women get together, let's say you have a guy who on the face of it looks like a pretty solid, stable dude, just in general, you know what I mean? If that exists, and he meets a lady, and she sees that in him, sometimes consciously, but mostly unconsciously, that very feature is going to get tested. It's going to get tested anyway, just by what life does. But it's going to get tested. And when a woman feels that feeling of disappointment, it's when she thought you were kind of stable, and suddenly it became clear that you aren't. Almost as if stability itself was a mask, or even something that you had to put a lot of energy into and can't sustain. And that's going to go on and on and on. Always. And it's of less concern than the actual central force between two people itself. Like they say, love always gets tested. It gets tested automatically just by, like I said, the ongoing of life. But people can't help but ask themselves, is this real? Because each of us as separate people, of course, at the end of the day, no matter what we say, we would like it if there was somebody on earth who loved you in such a way that was singular. It's why the whole vampire thing, like Jordan Peterson used to say, women fantasize about vampires. I mean, think about how much sense that makes, because a vampire, let's say a male in this case, is a dude who lives forever and mostly keeps to himself, but occasionally has to become unstable to stay alive. But he is this highly stable, immortal, disciplined in such a way that needs to be to stay alive. And obviously he's met multiple generations of women. And if such a creature, an entity, falls madly in love with you, well, I mean, that just says more than anything could ever say, because you're not just dealing with somebody who's met a wide range of people in one life, but multiple lives, and you are the one who this vampire is just uncontrollably in love with. Something that's lived for hundreds of years. So much so that he wants to keep you around forever and maybe turn you into a vampire too. I mean, it really pulls on the hardest levers of romantic ideals. And honestly, at the end of the day, that's what people want. And men want a woman who strikes them that way. As crazy as that sounds, I mean, you could go in any direction of your analysis of what you want as a person romantically. But I promise you, ultimately, when you get down to the bare bones of it, you would rather know one person who's extremely unique and special to you You would rather know everything about them than a few things about a lot of people. But life has phases. I mean, you dip your toes in a lot of different waters. And you don't plan for something like that. This thing that I am talking about here, in the most cliche possible way, does actually appear suddenly. And there it is. Suddenly you are gripped. And part of the strength of this grip has to do with the fact that it's mutual. And such an intense love offers the possibility of a very strong stability. And that's why marriage is so appealing to two people who are madly in love. Because you're basically saying, I want this stability forever till we die. But a true romantic is going to say, I am going to keep finding you. If there are multiple lives, I will keep finding you, even if you change shape. I will recognize you and I will continue to find you. And of course, that's what a kind of undying love is like. It makes you say things like that because that's how you feel. And I know that sounds incredibly corny, but I mean, imagine if you actually felt that. And it was mutual. I mean, what the hell else are you doing here? I mean, uh, yeah, it's like I say, imagine making people with somebody like that. So, ultimately, too, when these types of relationships come to the inevitable tests that arrive in life, there's going to be a very strong sense of disappointment if this stabilizing force, this love, breaks. You can probably only do that once. You can probably have that happen one time. And it's better that it happens early on than later. And this is kind of why we make our romantic stories in that exact format, where two people meet and they're tightly strung together by this inexplicable force. But then it's kind of damaged somehow. Somehow it becomes clear or evident that they have to go their separate ways. And this usually happens pretty early on, because such a strong binding force, particularly among two people who like to go their own way, it's going to run into some resistance. I mean, of course. But in these stories and movies, they inevitably find their way back. And you can really only do that once. I mean, you can really only put this strong, stabilizing force through such a, I guess, test, even though we don't really view it that way while it's happening. While it's happening, it feels terrible and real and all-consuming. You're not thinking about it that way, but that's kind of what it ends up being in retrospect. Because people need that shit. I mean, imagine if, without that test, imagine if it was being faked. Imagine if somebody was pretending, and later on you found that out. After you had said all this, the most beautiful things you've ever said to anybody, and you had these images in your mind of what the future might look like, and you find out that it's not real. And if it isn't, when that hit comes, that splinter comes, you'll go your separate ways. And that's fine, because you don't have this force that continues to pull at you, not unlike gravity. And through this stabilizing force, iterability is possible. And not only possible, but happens all the time. And reality just sort of does this. the United States is a stabilizing force. And we've noticed over time in civilization building that there are just things that you need, elements, to hold on to stability. You need kind of a balance, a system of balances. You need property rights. You need a large group of people who are able to own things. You need courts. You need to be able to hash things out in front of intense scrutiny. You need to be able to pick your leaders. I mean, think about it. One of the most important things about the United States is its stability. People get a tremendous, generally, sense of relief when investing in the U.S. in general, because its stability is basically automatic. It's just so constant and ever present. The idea of, some sort of revolution popping off is just so far-fetched. Nobody even worries about that. Like, we wake up every day, we go to work, we do our thing, and we don't even really consider anything but. But there are certain elements that you need. You need to be able to talk and say anything, essentially. And the public needs to be able to remain essentially sovereign. And within that, we have these cycles that go and go and go. Every 4 years there's an election. Every 365 days we go around the sun. Every 24 hours a day goes. And we just get used to this day after day after day thing. Monday through Friday. 4 quarters per year. Each quarter distinct. And we give reports on profits per quarter. And we think of things in those terms. Because of course. But within that stable framework, there is incredible variation and variability. And it's allowed to do its thing because it has such a stabilizing force. And it's utterly insane to think that this system of balances is so precise. It really is the cornerstone of our personal reality here. And again, as corny as it is to say, love is a stabilizing force, because you move that now on the level of 2 people, you move that to the level of the family. If you're in a family that genuinely loves each other, a lot of things can come and go. A lot of very hard moments. A lot of things can happen. A lot of friction can be there. But you never question the stabilizing force. And if you do, and you introduce that much instability, true instability, it does a bit of wreckage on your actual system as a person, your personal system of balances. Especially when you're younger and these things are being introduced to you. Not in terms of doctrine, but experience. And if you're somebody who spent a great portion of the beginning of your life in a highly unstable environment, where the very basic stabilizing force was not only in question, but known for sure to not exist, you'll always have that question. Did they actually love me? And it's going to be a horrific feeling to think to yourself that they didn't. And we always say the 2 people who are supposed to love you the most are your parents. That does something so profound, where the stabilizing force itself is in question. It limits the possibility of progress in other areas. It slows you down tremendously. It's as if gravity itself began to falter and our distance from the sun wobbled a little. And the knock-on effects, the possibility of progress, the possibility of a species existing and doing what we do, the odds of it goes down to 0. So, People do marry for a lot of reasons, especially this day and age, because there's more avenues offered, you could say. But it's like I said, it doesn't really matter what people say at different points in their life. You're going to want to marry for love. I mean, because there are knock-on effects for not existing in spheres that have weak or no or even the opposite of stabilizing forces. I mean, imagine day after day being with somebody that you don't love. So, these things you should probably know early on, obviously. And it's just incredible too, at a young age, when people introduce things to you that are premature, they hit your emotional circuitry like an artillery shell. And you set yourself back, and it's very important to have yourself as a little person and other little people running around entrusted with who they're around, because that stabilizing force needs to be so ubiquitous that those kids are none the wiser. They're just being kids. It's like we say all the time, your innocence, and innocence lost and innocence kept, maintained. I mean, a certain darkness can creep in without that force. It's like the absence of light itself. And we often think of it in that way too, because it fits. And, people say they need to love their job, of course, we really need to have that love word around. Otherwise, you just completely lose the gusto. I mean, you completely lose that thing that's going to allow for your full progress, the full unleashing of your abilities. And people can be alone too for extended periods of time. It's like, especially this day and age, it's like if you yourself are this immense stabilizing force, because there's also the human being and just the world in general outside of other human beings. If there's a certain love there as well, which is another word I don't like to use too heavily, because when I talk about love, it's not like this, feel good thing. When I try to talk about it, I try to talk about it as real as possible. I mean, to actually feel that, for the world, despite its obvious flaws. But I don't blame the world for its flaws. I expect that. Of course. I mean, we're human beings living on a planet, on this ride around the sun. I mean, there's all different types of people as well. So there's no need to get excessively ruined about the ails of humanity, because so long as in your life, in your world, you are better, or an actual example of what you would actually want to see in the world, and you're doing that, then you're making the world a better place just by existing. And it becomes pretty clear that if obviously everybody was doing that, the world would be a better place. Which is a hokey thing, but it's true. But that's not going to happen. You can forget about that. You can forget about the idea that everybody's just going to suddenly become good and you can just teach everybody to be good. You can completely get that out of your mind, because that's not going to happen. It's a failure to understand human psychology to even think that. That is a childlike view. It's actually a failure to understand reality as well, because you can't have all of one thing. As soon as you have all of good, let's say, as soon as you have all love, everything just ceases to exist. It literally has to exist. There has to be evil. There has to be bad. There has to be destruction, all these things. It has to exist. Otherwise, nothing exists, because it's the very scheme of reality. It's the very state of all things. So you're better off, if you are one of the good people, just being good to the best of your ability. And I've always had like a good example with my parents and my family in general. There hasn't been much of a chance for any kind of darkness to make its way in. And I've seen what it looks like when things are just stable. And within that, of course, there is the incredible variability. And the United States is just such a good example of how you can have something like freedom of speech and something that appears as unstable to the untrained eye, but is actually stability at work, because, discord on one level is harmony on another. You need people screeching and being their highly unstable, insane selves as part of the overall scheme of stability. And it's just pretty wild, the possibilities that can open up. And you have something like the sun, so extremely violent. I mean, just imagine the loudest sound you can think of, constantly blaring, and even louder than that, radiating. Just unbelievable violence, yet incredibly stable and beautiful. And all the games, all the iterations, all the days, over and over and over again, all of the different stories of different teams, of different championships, different seasons, all within this stability, but with incredible variability, with all the different personalities, all the different marks left on different sports and different games. All of the dramatic events that have come from something that we might be able to call predictable. It's like we know that two teams are going to play. We know one is going to win and one is going to lose. We know the rules. We know the players. We know the coaches. But we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And that is basically it for most things. And as human beings here on Earth, it's like we've been provided levels. And the ultimate stabilizing force is the architect of everything himself. And it's like we've given levels. First, you realize that you look up at the sky and you see the same thing kind of all the time. You kind of see the sun and the moon and the stars and the different seasons. You slowly, as time goes, you start to notice the patterns, and it slowly starts to catalog into you what's happening. But back then, there was oral tradition and information passed down orally, but there was no language sharp enough to describe the world accurately enough, to explain it thoroughly enough to do anything really about it. And a human life, it wasn't enough time to understand enough of what was happening to get a decent picture. So it's like I said in a past video, once we started being able to adequately represent what was happening in the world with a language, preferably English, because in my opinion English is the best descriptive language that's ever existed. And we have a whole scientific jargon that has been born of English, Latin, and Germanic. So we have in our language an incredibly descriptive pairing of romance, the romantic languages, as well as more of the technical and scientific languages. And we're the ones who essentially we're naming most things that most people call things, like specific genus, species, all different sorts of insane words that we use to describe things. So, and then we started storing that information, and obviously people come along, study it, and add to it. But it's like there's levels. And once you unlock one level, it's up to you to store it somehow, or publicize it somehow, or make it known somehow to where more people can use it and add on to it. Because you don't want to lose it. You don't want to lose the ability to make fire. You don't want to lose the wheel. You don't want to lose the ability to make paper and ink. Because it might be lost forever. It's not easy to figure these things out when you don't have any sort of context to work from whatsoever. Like you slowly find out that within this day to day to day to day, within this life after life after life, you can slowly tick your way up and slowly add to it more and more and more and more and more. And it takes the body of work of the generations that came before you and your ability to decode it and read it and add to it that just adds another layer. It's like, finding out that Earth was round is another layer. Finding out more about the solar system, what the sun is. Electricity. The ability to send electricity, to split it off into little signals, into transistors, into broadcasting sounds over radio waves. Slowly, more and more. And each time a new thing is discovered that's massive like that, there's a shock on civilization. But the stability remains. And before this stability, there was no there was no stability in the way that we think of it now. Obviously, people came and went. They defended their people and themselves, and they raided others. There was no lines on maps. There was no borders. There was just names of people and regions. The nation state is a new concept. It's not that old at all. In fact, it's a highly modern situation to have a specific country with a name for it. It's brand new, but it leads to much higher levels of organization and much higher possibilities for iteration and progression. It just does. And the United States was brilliant. Sometimes we take for granted how brilliant it was to make 50 states instead of 50 countries, because that would have been just catastrophic. Or even 2 countries or 3 or 4, because they very well could have. But everybody bought in, for the most part. Those who were on board with the project, they bought in. And and it's led to some pretty remarkable things, all the way down to where, splitting of the atom is another level, to where we're running a fuel and an oxidizer together through a pump out a nozzle to leave the atmosphere and go out there and see what's going on out there in space. I mean, think about the stability, the absolute freak level stability required for that line of events to be etched into time. And within that remarkable stability, think about how much variability has happened within it. Like the 2 world wars were 2 massive punches at the stabilizing force. Because that's kind of what we've always feared, at least for the last, relatively decent period of time, is that somebody's way of governing was going to expand globally, and their version of a stabilizing force would reign over the world. And the whole idea was our way of facilitating stability is better than your way of facilitating stability. That was kind of the core of the concept of the Cold War. But there are other elements than just laws and the political scheme. Like, there are factors that I don't really think we were thinking about. Like, I would be curious to know when it actually became a strategy of the United States to spend so much that our enemies would also have to try to do the same, and it would eventually bankrupt them. Because if your strength is generating wealth, then you may as well use that strength. And we've introduced so many new things into civilization that have tried to test the stability of this scheme, of this country. And it's only made it better. Like what I was talking about earlier, in a romantic situation, when you have that initial break, when you have that thing happens, say you two people fall madly in love with each other, and they have that situation that comes around that sort of gives them both a chance to leave forever. If they do come back together, there's this almost this, not a completely a sense of relief, but there's also this sense of whatever the opposite of disappointment is. It's almost like this sense of confirmation. It's this sense of reinforcement. Because it's like, there's so many people available to us now, man. It's not like we're just in our little towns dating. I mean, you're on the internet. There's millions and millions of people available to you. If there is somebody that you meet who you could easily go in any direction at any time, and you don't because of their existence, I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing. And there is no force that I can think of that is more stabilizing.